This is Ray Stokes, Oral History section of the TCOM Health Sciences Library on October the 21st, 1992. My guest today is a member of the second graduating class of the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine. He is Dr. Sam Buchanan. I think it's Samuel Woodrow Buchanan Jr., but we call him Dr. Sam. Dr. Sam is the chairman, recently appointed after having worked under the auspices and help of the chairman that retired recently, Russ Jenkins. Dr. Sam is now the new chairman of the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine Surgery Department. Dr. Sam, it's sure a pleasure to have you with us today. And I want to pick your brain on a number of things. You've done more than pick my brain. You've taken my gallbladder out. But still, I want to talk to you about your experiences. You were from Fort Worth.
Born and raised.
Native born here in Fort Worth. I know a little bit about your background. Your father and I were very close friends when we were youngsters, back down at Paper Boys, or we call ourselves Paper Boys, carrier salesmen for the Star Telegram. And so I've known you since you got out of, where'd you go to school? Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Pasco High School and graduated in 1968.
1968. Well, that Pasco, I identify with Central, not Pasco. Same school.
That's right.
68. Where'd you go to college?
Texas Christian University.
And that's where you got your bachelor's degree?
Mm-hmm.
All right. What year did you finish there?
I went to TCU on the combination program.
Mm-hmm.
I went 3 years to TCU, and then I applied to TCOM. And the first year that I was at TCOM, I received credit for that year, and then I received my BS from TCU after my first year at TCOM.
Yeah.
And to my knowledge, that was the first time that a TCU graduate had matriculated at a DO school.
Is that right?
On a 3-year program.
Yeah. In other words, you graduated in 75 from TCOM, you graduated from TCU in 72.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. And that was, you were in the first, as far as you know, as far as TCU graduate.
I think I was,
yeah.
Because it caused quite a stir.
Well, it caused quite a stir. Well, of course, anything that TCOM did in those days kind of caused quite a stir with certain peoples. Dr. Sam, you've had quite a career, and I want to discuss it kind of in a chronological order. I have here a copy of the 1975 speculum. That was your class your yearbook of your class, graduating class, 1975. There were 25 of you that graduated. 32 of you started, and 25 of you made it. So while you were in school, there were 1 or 2 pictures taken of some of the members. I'm looking at a picture right here of you looking up, and must have been in the fall because there are no leaves on the trees, and a young lady who's looking down at you, and you're looking up at her. Tell us a little bit about this picture.
That picture was taken, I believe, in December of my senior year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my first daughter, who was born 3 months before I started at TCOM.
3 months before.
That's Melissa.
And she looked like what then? She's about 3 or 4 there, huh?
Mm-hmm. She was 4. That was my senior picture.
Yeah, 4 years old. All right, that answers that question. Now let's go proceed just a little bit here and see what. All right, you must have been the senior at this when this picture was taken, or at least a junior. This was. This shows a picture of the front of what we call the Central Clinic, which did become the medical examiner's building later on. Now it's part of, I believe it's pediatrics department here at TCOM. Here's a picture of you with holding a young baby who's not a baby, she's a young child, 2 or 3 years old looks like, and a colleague here named Dr. Prophet. You're holding her, and you're trying to pacify her, I imagine. Can you give me any details about that picture?
I don't
do you remember that?
I don't remember the day, but I remember the clinic. And this was our central clinic at that time. We had several around town. We had the Rosedale Clinic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here's a picture of the Rosedale Clinic right here.
There's Dr. Griffith. He was the director there. And then of course, we had the van.
Yeah.
We went all over town delivering health care.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Prophet now is a neurologist.
Neurologist. Where is he now?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure where he is, but
Dr. Griffith, you know, is still, he lives over in Arlington. I see him occasionally at various meetings and so forth. He retired some time ago. All right. Well, here's a picture of, I want to read this. This is quite a lineup here. This is Sam W. Buchanan, Jr. It shows you a picture here. Yeah, nice looking young man. And here's your quote that all seniors gave at one time or another, and this is in your book, and it says, quote, "A true physician is one who blends his knowledge of science with a love of man to improve the quality of life itself," end of quote. And it shows here that you graduated from Texas Christian University with a BS. And you're a member in 1973-75 of Sigma Sigma Phi. You won the Mosby Book Award, 72-73. You received the AAOA National Scholarship. That AAOA, that'd be the auxiliary to the American Osteopathic Association. Received that scholarship in 1971-73. You want to add anything to that? Does that bring anything to mind?
well, that was one of the reasons that I was able to come to TCOM.
Okay, well, that's pretty important.
Because if you remember back then, it was a private school, and the tuition was rather steep.
$2,000 a year.
$2,000.
You paid me before you got in.
That's right.
Okay.
And I applied for that scholarship and received it, and because I received it, I decided that was one of the reasons that helped me to come to TCOM.
Good. Then you also were a student member of the American Osteopathic College General Practitioners Society. You were the junior class representative to the curriculum committee in 73 and 74. And you were a representative to State Health Manpower Conference in 1974. Now, is there anything particular that brings to mind? You're attending that series of meetings or whatnot.
I remember that was a group that was trying to bring together all the different disciplines in medicine, particularly allopathic medicine, osteopathic medicine, chiropractic, podiatry.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably one of the precursors of some of the regional planning committees that are available today.
Mm-hmm. I see. All right. Well, that pretty well takes care of all but one more picture here that we have. Here's a picture of your graduation. TCOM's first honorary degree, Doctor of Science. Oh, that's you remember that gentleman very well. I'm reading here a picture accompanying the picture viewing the student body in the graduation ceremonies as Dr. Lubel presenting the honorary degree to Dr. Henry Hart, of which I know you're familiar. Over here on this page, it shows the various awards that you earned or received as a student doctor. It's enviable, and it certainly is an enviable award, and it's still being given every year by Dr. T. Robert Sharp, who practices over in Mesquite, Texas. He started, he and his lovely wife Marjorie, who later passed away. T.R. Sharp, Undergraduate General Practitioner of the Year. Happened to be at that time, 1975, Sam W. Buchanan, Jr. And then you did, when you walked across the stage, they announced the fact that you graduated cum laude. And I think you were also cum laude at Texas Christian.
Yes.
All right, I believe we got one more mark here. No, I guess that was the last. No, here's something. There we are. I knew there was one more. Well, this gets you graduated. This gets you a picture that you were appreciated very much, the graduating class standing outside of the building where you graduated from. Let's see, you were in the second class, so you graduated from Will Rogers Auditorium.
I think it was at Scott Theater. We were right across the
Oh, that's
street.
right. You're right. The first two classes
We were in Scott
First two
Theater.
classes, and the third class went down to Will Rogers. You corrected me in that. I stand corrected. In other words, outside the Scott Theater, about the June 2nd or 3rd of 1975, says Sam W. Buchanan, Jr., Doctors Hospital, Columbus, Ohio. Now then, we put down the book. and let's take it from when you became an intern. Anything particular? You were there in 1975 and 76 as an intern. What awards did you get while you were there?
I received the Resident Trainer Award the year that I was chief resident. This was an award that the intern class gave to one of the residents that they felt had helped them with their training during the year.
In other words, then that would have been the second year that you were there.
No, the last year, I believe.
Oh, the last year.
The chief resident year.
Well, then how many years were you at Doctors?
5 years.
5 years. So you were intern 1 year, or how did you work that?
We took a 1-year rotating internship and then 4 years of general surgery.
General surgery.
So I graduated from that program in '80.
Mm-hmm. Now, while you were after you graduated, you told me something preceding our little get-together here, that you did a private practice in Columbus as a general surgeon.
Mm-hmm. I joined the surgical group, Surgery and Gynecology Incorporated in Columbus, and I practiced there for nearly a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I went to Cleveland Clinic for a year to study heart surgery.
Tell us a little bit about your experience there.
At Cleveland Clinic?
At Cleveland Clinic.
Well, Cleveland Clinic is a world-class referral center, and we did probably 15 to 20 heart surgeries per day there back in 1981.
Yeah.
And Cleveland Clinic continues to be a world-class center.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the work of Dr. Jeff Alpern, who graduated, you know, from TCOM in '79? He's heart transplants.
Yes.
I believe he's the first DO that started that. Did you know him there at all?
Did not know him.
Yeah.
We were not contemporaries.
Yeah. When you left there, then Cleveland Clinic, what did you do then?
Well, I came back to Texas.
Oh, you came back to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then while you were, I want to getting a little out of chronological order here. Not that that matters, but when you were at Columbus, while you were there, before you went, I guess, to Cleveland Clinic, you also were a volunteer member of the clinical faculty at the Ohio College of Osteopathic Medicine.
Mm-hmm.
That's over at Athens, the Ohio University, and then the Osteopathic College is part of the university there. What experience did you have there?
The Ohio College and Doctors Hospital had a very innovative teaching model.
Mm-hmm.
They enlisted the support of private practitioners that were on staff at Doctors Hospital, and specifically the residents. And the residents were given clinical appointments and were responsible for in-house teaching of the students.
Mm-hmm.
We gave lectures, we directed the students in their rotations, and we had an on-site dean in the hospital who was Dr. Harper.
Mm-hmm.
And back then is where I first knew Dr. Cohen, who was one of my trainers in pediatrics.
Oh, he was.
Mm-hmm.
Our current, you're referring to our current dean and vice president of academic affairs.
Mm-hmm. And his
TCO.
partner, Dr. Harper, became the on-site dean at the Ohio College.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Richards, I believe, was either in practice there.
He was in practice at Columbus.
At that
I don't
time.
know
I think
about,
he was in practice when I was a house officer.
He came here in '81.
So he came here about the same time I did.
Mm-hmm. Sure did.
So we were in Doctors. So Doctors Hospital is it's one of the flagships of our profession. There's
Mm-hmm. How many beds do they have there in that hospital?
At that time, we had about 650 beds on 2 campuses.
650
And,
beds. Mm-hmm.
It was a very large
But
teaching
it
hospital.
truly is a flagship of our profession.
Mm-hmm. At that time, we had 25 interns and about 40 or 50 residents.
Mm-hmm.
And
Has it progressed down through the years? It's been a
Very
number
much
of
so.
days since you were there.
very much so.
Do you ever get back there any?
I go back to visit, and I go back for recruiting trips,
Mm-hmm.
and I have been a speaker there at their annual alumni. My
Mm-hmm.
10th year alumni meeting there, I was a speaker.
Oh, you were?
That's a program they put on each year for their graduates. They have an alumni meeting. And the 10th year of my alumni, I was a speaker.
Yeah, well, good, good. Okay, you got to Texas, came back to Texas in '81, huh? And you became a member of the faculty, the staff over at those days, Fort Worth Osteopathic, and that's still Fort Worth. It's FWO to me, and I guess it is to you, although I think the name has changed a little, and medical center and so forth. When did you first become identified as a member of the faculty of TCOM?
I started immediately with the school.
In other words, you had you'd made some previous arrangements. You knew when you came back from Ohio you were coming here to teach.
Well, the way it worked,
Or you thought you would.
when I graduated, my plans were to become an internist.
An internist.
Internist.
Not a surgeon.
You remember Gary Cooper?
Oh, very much so.
Okay.
Sure.
Gary was a very dear friend of mine. And Bill Neal, who was one of my
He was
professors.
a pediatrician, wasn't he?
Bill arranged for me to go to Columbus for my postgraduate, and I went there to become an internist.
Yeah.
And after my first rotation at Columbus, I decided I was going to be a surgeon. And all during the years that I was in my postgraduate work, I maintained my friendship with Dr. Jenkins and Dr. Alter.
Yeah.
And so when I decided I wanted to come back to Fort Worth, because they had become full-time with the school, and I wanted to join them in practice, I became full-time faculty immediately.
Well, that's interesting.
Dr. Jenkins recruited me here, and I've been here ever since.
Dr. Russ?
Dr. Russ.
Yeah. I thought of something when you were talking about your experiences there in Columbus. I don't know whether you remember it or not. I wouldn't expect you to, but in August of 1977, my wife and I were on our way to visit some of her relatives in Cleveland. And we stopped in Columbus long enough to find a telephone to call Sam Buchanan. We finally got a hold of you, so that would be, of course, 77. That would be pretty close to your final year, or, well,
That was halfway point.
halfway point. In other words, you were in surgical residency then at that time, not internist. All right, you're back here now, and you're on the faculty in the surgery department at TCOM. Then you were here for, or I say, 2 or 3 years when our president and dean at that time was Ralph Willard.
Yes.
You have any particular experiences that you relate to Dr. Willard that you can think of?
Really back then, I think that most of my emphasis was on building a practice. And I really didn't have that much contact with administration. I knew Dr. Willard very well, and really I know him better now than I did then. He was certainly an important leader of the school and the profession, and as you know, a retired military man and a surgeon.
Well, let me digress just long enough. It could go without saying, but I'm going to say it every time I think about him, because we're sitting here in a building today, a very beautiful structure, the library building of TCOM. And I still credit Dr. Ralph Willard for being responsible for getting the monies. Of course, that's another story and so forth, but he was very instrumental in helping promote the development of TCOM, although he wasn't its first president, but still pretty close. Excuse me. Oh, okay, I just happened to think about that with Ralph. Then you were building your own practice and teaching as far as whatever your duties were in the surgery department. Any particular, well, you had, of course, faculty meetings, department meetings, and then you had your own personal responsibilities with doctor-patient relationships and so forth. I know there might not be anything that you could discuss, but is there anything at all that you can think of as an experience that you would like to relate for posterity during those beginning days of your surgical life?
Oh, I remember probably the challenges that all young practitioners face. To be real honest, probably the fear of starting into a new practice, especially in a new location. And I remember a lot of people here that gave me a lot of help.
Well, can you, and namely, I mean, or do you want to name anybody?
Well, the school was certainly supportive,
Yeah.
and my department was supportive. I owe a lot of my success, I believe, to people that came before me, people that had the courage to build this school and to build our hospital,
Yeah.
specifically Dr. Roy Fisher and Dr. Jenkins, and people like yourself that had the courage and the innovation to build a medical school in a town that had a lot of hospitals, and really it took a lot of work to build our niche here over the years.
Yeah.
And I can remember Dr. Fisher specifically, the encouragement that he gave me after I came here. It took a while to build a surgical practice in this environment, and Dr. Fisher said, stay the course and take care of your patients and work hard and you'll be successful.
He's doing very well in retirement life.
He's still doing very well.
Well, yeah, you know, I belong to a group who, he sits right behind me at the TCU football games every year, and of course I keep up with him in other pursuits as well, but I always enjoy Peggy and Roy sitting right behind us at the TCU games. And you were mentioning a moment ago about those responsible for the growth of the school. I take no credit whatsoever in its growth, but it does give me a tremendous satisfaction to know that I had a little finger, now that's the right finger, I had a little finger in the hand that built all of this or had something to do with it. It's very gratifying. I still pinch myself every now and then to make sure it's happening. All right, now then, you're recently appointed the department chairman. Anything you want to share as to what your goals for the department may be? How many members in your department? How many surgical doctors are in your department now?
At the present time, we have 4.
Have 4? Can you give a little rundown on what their specialties might be?
We have a cardiovascular thoracic surgeon, Dr. Robert McFall. And an interesting story about Robert, where you may know this, but he's also a graduate of TCOM.
Yeah.
And was class president and was on the
I believe
dean's
he graduated
list.
in '81, I believe.
He called me one day when I was chief resident at Doctors. I received a phone call from this voice from Texas that said, I've heard that we have a Texas graduate at the Doctors Hospital, and I wanted to know if I can come there. So we arranged a rotation, and then he stayed in residency, and so I recruited him. So our relationship goes back many years as well. And Dr. Roy Lowry, who's in our department, was a classmate of mine.
Class of '77.
So we have 3 TCOM alumni in our department. And then 1 year ago, we added Dr. Don Ross, who's a urologist.
He has a son who's a graduate.
He has a son who's a graduate, practices in the area.
Yeah, right.
Our department needs to expand at this time. We are in the process of adding a neurosurgeon at this time. We're in discussions with orthopedics and looking at building an orthopedic residency. We've just brought the urology residency under the TCOM umbrella, so it's now one of our programs.
Right.
We also are interested in oncological surgery, reconstructive surgery, as well as expanding into satellite locations in smaller communities to become a regional referral center. So our referral pattern is growing, and we've been very active in the Carswell Hospital, where we had a clinic for 5 years. And with the closing of the Carswell base, we've lost that opportunity, but others are being developed.
Well, is there anything that you're at liberty to discuss about, and when you say that the closing of Carswell, you lost that possibility, But, and that you say there are others. Is there anything that you can elaborate on at this time as to what your pursuits might be?
We're very interested in Granbury.
Granbury?
We have
We have a lot of DOs, graduates in Granbury.
well, I was going to bring that up. We have two of my classmates are there. Chuck O'Toole, and
Internist.
he's an internist. He trained in the military.
Yeah.
And a very fine internist. And Bob Wilson, who is a family practitioner, was in my class. And Roger Hamilton, who
Passed away.
approximately 2 years ago, was in my class.
Right.
So several TCOM graduates from my class have come back to Fort Worth and the surrounding areas. So we're very interested in Granbury. It's a growing community. It's a very strong osteopathic community. And we're developing relationships in that city, and we also have just recently contracted to open 2 offices there from our department.
From your department. You think that's forthcoming in the near future?
2 of our doctors are working there now. One is in affiliation with Dr. Peter Wilsey, and another will be with Dr. Chris Hull and Bob Brunell, who are also TCOM graduates. So you can see that the school is populating the Metroplex as well as the rest of the state.
Well, that's interesting. That really is. That's gratifying, too. You were mentioning Chuck O'Toole a moment ago. He's one of my favorites, too. You know, I've got a lot of favorites. And I relate to all of the graduates in the 70s and maybe the 1980 class, but from there on I don't relate too well because I just had no contact with them. But had contact with your class and other classes. But O'Toole, before Hussein Saddam kind of created a little problem with lots and lots of people, he was up here doing a grand rounds one day, and I ran into him in the hall, and I said, let's have lunch. I'm coming down to Granbury next week. He said, fine. So we set up the time for me to meet him and so forth. So I didn't make any attempt to realize that Alexander Graham Bell invented the phone. I didn't call down for any reason to, because I was going anyway. So I get down there, and I walk in about 10 minutes to 12, and I says, tell Dr. Chuck that I'm here to go to lunch with him. She looked at me kind of funny. She says, well, if you were to go to lunch with him, you're going to have to go all the way to London, England. Now, this was on like a Wednesday. And then when he went home about 2 o'clock the following morning, Thursday morning, he received notice, and he left on a Friday, I think, and was gone. When I went down the following Wednesday, he'd been in London for 2 or 3 days. So that's
he
how
received
quick
a 48-hour notice.
Right. That's right. Well, let's see now. Any other goals and aspirations that you foresee for the school as far as, in other words, we're on 16 acres now, and when you and I associated with it, we had a square block.
That's right. Actually, we had, if you'll remember, we had the anatomy building where the hospital's parking garage is now.
Right.
And the first floor was where I was interviewed in Dr. Hart's office. And
Little White House, we call it.
Little White House. The school was in the 5th floor of the hospital, which is now the gynecology ward.
You know, thanks to Mary Lubel, Dr. Lubel's lovely wife, you know, there's a plaque up there on the 5th floor now that says that this, not the not the bowling alley, was the original location. Excuse me. Go ahead.
I remember the bowling alley, and I remember hanging sheetrock between classes.
Between classes, yeah.
And I remember the carpenter, was it Eldon?
Yeah, Eldon.
That taught most of us how to become better carpenters while we became physicians.
That's right. That's right. I don't know what we'd have done without you. Of course, I knew nothing about the mechanical aspect, but I was charged with the responsibility of pointing, I guess you'd say. I had sense enough to point, so forth. So that was a job I wasn't qualified for, but I had to wear that hat. Yeah,
Well,
he did a good job. He certainly did.
We've gone from a school of volunteer faculty,
Which
was a private school,
Right.
to a very large medical school now of full-time faculty.
Yeah.
We still have many volunteer faculty that I think should be noted in the history books. Although we do have full-time faculty At the school in our department, for example, we have approximately 20 volunteer faculty.
In your department?
Yes.
Well, now that's
several,
something that needs to be examined, I think.
We
Really
have
does.
several part-time faculty that teach in areas where we don't have full-time faculty. For example, eye surgery. We have urologists on part-time faculty, and we have orthopedic surgeons on part-time faculty. We have 4 right now. And then we have multiple clinical faculty that are volunteer faculty that teach because they enjoy contributing. And I think that commendation should be given to all these people that serve the school and the profession.
Yeah.
I think the school has grown tremendously. It's the campus here is beautiful, and I remember back in the days when we were in the bowling alley, we would sit around and say, you know, someday we're going to come back here and there will be skyscrapers here.
Yeah.
And it did come to pass.
It certainly has. It certainly has.
I think comments should be made regarding the hospital across the street. Our primary teaching hospital has been very vital in the development of the school.
That's absolutely the truth. It surely is. Go ahead.
The osteopathic profession has been challenged because we don't have the resources that the allopathic institutions have had. The hospitals in our profession that teach are mostly private institutions, as opposed to large county institutions and state institutions that support the allopathic schools. And it's been a particular challenge in this profession to teach with limited resources of the private sector as far as hospitals and clinicians. And I think that's a tribute to our profession, that we've been able to build and survive in these kind of times.
Do you have any insight or any information? You know, for some time now, we've been making overtures and gestures and even maybe a gentleman's agreement to some degree. I don't know how official it's become, but we have some inroads with the Veterans Administration, VA. Do you know where we may be, what juncture we might be at this time with any future activities as far as the VA is concerned?
I'm not really well informed about that. We do not have a VA hospital in Fort Worth. There are VA outpatient facilities that the school does have some participation in. And I believe at the present time we're looking at maybe an affiliation agreement with the VA hospital in Waco.
In Waco.
And so far those have not involved the surgical department.
Yeah. Okay. You know, the last time I was in your office, one of the first things I do, the good pleasure that I have in the work that I'm involved with the TCOM Foundation now, I have the opportunity to go around to various doctors' offices and visit them, you know, at their, and not at an opportune time, it's usually an inopportune time, but the time they permit me to see them, and the first thing I always look at is what they've got on their walls, and the same thing I did in the last time I was in your office. And I noticed a beautiful aerial shot of the Blue Angels. What's your association with the Blue Angels? This is off of the subject, but at least it's part of your life.
Well, the Blue Angels were hosted by our osteopathic hospital.
That was back about 4 or 5 years ago, wasn't it?
I believe so. It's a spinoff of our affiliation agreement that we've had over the years with the Carswell Air Force Base Hospital here, who is a sister hospital to ours because they were founded roughly the same time. And during the years, we have had a very good working relationship with Carswell. And the Blue Angels were invited here as part of the Carswell's air show. And the hospital hosted a Blue Angels luncheon for our community leaders and for people at the college. And the Blue Angels gave a presentation, and they invited the members to come and participate in the air show, and they provided VIP passes and facilities right at the runway. And so we became friends with them, and after they left, they sent me a couple of pictures.
Yeah. Another picture that I saw in your office, it kind of excited me because anytime I see a picture of a dress uniform of a Marine, it always kind of makes my heart do a little flip-flop. And I noticed a young Marine's picture. Can you tell me who that is?
That's the newest addition to our family.
Newest addition, okay.
The little girl you saw in the picture was married 2 weeks ago. And
The one that was it's in the book here.
The one that was in the tree.
Uh-huh.
She was married, and she and her husband, who is in the Marines, are in Greenville, North Carolina. He's at Cherry Point. And he has something to do with communications in the Marines.
Communications. Cherry Point.
Cherry Point.
Well, I never made Cherry Point. I'm a West End, West Coast Marine. Let's see now. What's your wife has changed her vocation here recently, hadn't she?
Yes. She has returned to school to become an attorney.
Yeah,
And she's currently a 2L at SMU Law School.
Who are we talking about?
This is Talisha.
Talisha. Is that an Indian name?
I'm not sure, right?
Yeah.
It's an unusual name.
It is.
She's the first one I ever knew.
I've known her, not as long as I've known you, but I have known her a number of years before you all were married. But, very beautiful woman. And you're very fortunate.
Yes, I have. I have been blessed.
And she's fortunate, too. She really is. Can you summate a summation of your experiences here at TCOM since getting out of TCU and all the many pages of history that you've helped establish?
Well, I think if anything, Ray, I've been very fortunate. I think I'm fortunate to have become an osteopathic physician. My plans were to become an allopathic physician when I was at TCU. And
now, what caused you to change that?
Well, my father at that time had a correspondence school and was very active in training medical and dental assistants.
I see.
Through his work with the Osteopathic Medical State Association, he became friends with George Lubel and Bobby Stratton and Ray Stokes and others.
Yeah.
And he encouraged me to join this profession. So I interviewed with several of the osteopathic physicians.
Including George Lubel?
George Lubel. And I remember what they told me. They said, if you want to be on the bandwagon, you can be an allopath. And if you want to push the bandwagon, you can be an osteopath. And I never forgot that.
Well, I don't know whether I ever heard that or not.
Bobby Stratton told me that.
Is that right?
He did. And I came and interviewed here, and although it was a small school, I thought it had potential. Typical surgeon. Can't get away from the beeper.
That's part of the trade.
And I applied for the scholarship and received it, and I felt that the school had tremendous potential, and I wanted to participate and help.
Yeah.
And ever since that time, I've been happy I did that. I've had good medical school training. Felt school was difficult, challenging, but excellent. The postgraduate training programs that I've been to have been good and have prepared me for practice.
Good.
And I believe that our profession has a mission to continue to offer primary care and specialty care in the best way that we can. And I think our profession will continue to grow. I think challenges that face us today are many. The thing that's probably most challenging is the need to develop postgraduate programs to train our graduates.
Yeah.
We need to attract the best students that we can, and we need to become very competitive and knowledgeable in the healthcare profession that we're now in because of the challenges of the HMOs and the third-party payers and the government involvement in medicine. And that's another challenge that will affect our profession.
Yeah.
We have to develop our hospitals and protect them, and we have to remain loyal to each other. And I think if we do all of these things, we'll survive.
Well, Dr. Sam, it's been a real pleasure, and on behalf of the oral history section of this great library, you know, I had a hard time saying library. Dr. Hart used to correct me. He said, Ray, I'm not trying to influence you, except he said there's an R in there that you're not using in library. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
I appreciate the opportunity.
So this is Ray Stokes again, here in the studio of the Biomedical Communications Department of TCOM, signing off.